Well, we have to begin with the flooding in Pakistan. We know that the Prime Minister has called these floods the worst in the history of his country. We know every province has been affected, and the worst affected of them are in the south, Sindh and Balochistan. The water there is flowing down the overflowing Indus River and continuing to cause problems. We know mountainous regions in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa are also badly hit. We're going to bring you reports from across Pakistan in the next few minutes. But let's begin with the UN Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres. He's due to travel to Pakistan next week, and we've heard from him today.
The Pakistani people are facing a monsoon on steroids, the relentless impact of epochal levels of rain and flooding. The scale of needs is rising like the floodwaters, and it requires the world's collective and prioritized attention. The United Nations is issuing a flash appeal for $160 million to support the response led by the government of Pakistan.
So the UN has launched an aid appeal, and a lot of aid is evidently needed. It's been raining solidly in Pakistan since the monsoon season began in June. We know more than 1,000 people have already died. An estimated 33 million people are directly affected. That's 1 in 7 people in the country. Authorities say at least $10 billion worth of damage has been caused. Now, flooding is not uncommon during monsoon season, but Pakistan's climate minister has told the BBC this is different.
Right now, what we're seeing is a devastating monsoon that's inundated more than it's more than one-third of the country. And the volume and scale of water that's come down is so consistent and without gaps for 8 weeks that there's been nowhere to put the water when we, drain it out. Where do you put it? It's just two provinces are like, the south is just like one large ocean.
Now, South Pakistan there being described as one large ocean. Our correspondent Pumza Fulani is at a displacement camp in Sindh province.
Officials say about 60% of Pakistan is underwater. They've also reported that 33 million people have been affected by this year's floods. Now, the numbers on their own are alarming, but it's when you get to the ground and you realize that these are not numbers, these are people. And especially poor people have been the most affected. This community were fine a few weeks ago. They were in their homes, they could feed their children, they had clothes. And when the floods came, their homes were destroyed. A number of them lived just across the road, others where there's currently water. Under that water is where their homes used to be. They tell me that they've gone for days without food, and they don't know if help is coming at all. Local aid agencies say they are doing everything that they can to try and feed everyone, but admit they are overstretched and under-resourced. They're also relying on help from international donors. People have tried saving, see these sort of pictures that when people arrive, anyone that stops by and brings any little thing, it creates panic, it creates desperation in people because they don't know who else is going to come and what they will bring for them. It's created a sense of desperation and uncertainty for poorer communities. And these sorts of images, people worry, will continue on for at least months. They don't know when life will return to normal.
Well, next, let's turn to North Pakistan. Our correspondent Secunda Kamani is in the town of Nowshera.
Along one of Pakistan's busiest motorways, a makeshift camp. Poor families forced from their homes. I'm in so much pain, I can't even express it, says Rosina. We've even lost our honour. Where else can we go? Wading through the suburbs of the northern city of Nowshera, families trying to reach their homes. We haven't been able to get to our house. Just look at the road, says this woman. How can we get there? No one is helping us. Imadullah, a chef, has just returned to his home for the first time. Will you be able to buy all of these things again, rebuild this house? No, he says. I'm just asking God to help us get enough food for now. We've got nothing left. We couldn't save anything, just our children's lives. Look at all of this.
Floods happen during the monsoon here every year, but not like this.
Well, next we report from Punjab province in central Pakistan. The BBC's Tahab Asghar has visited a medical camp there.
Ali and his friends are temporarily housed in this camp established by the government for families displaced.
When the flood came, my dog was also washed away in it. Now I miss him so much.
Flash floods washed away Nazira Bibi's home, kettle, and all belongings. Now her 1-year-old has fallen sick.
When we were sleeping, water ran into our homes. There was water everywhere. Eventually, it got over our shoulders. All animals drowned in the flood. We were left with nothing. Nearby, there was high road. We went there with our children. And then we came here.
Lack of clean water is causing diarrhea and skin ailments in children, while women are coming to doctors with signs of depression.
Female and the children, they have so many issues. Actually, we are trying our best to provide them all kind of the medicines and the clothes and other things. It's a big loss to them.
Women and children have been affected the most. A lot of women here told me that still they haven't received enough aid or help. But they are fortunate people, at least they have access to medical camps. There are thousands and hundreds of other women and children who are still stuck in far-flung villages of Pakistan.
Well, Pakistan's government says rebuilding people's lives is a priority. The minister in charge of flood relief has spoken to the BBC.
What we need is that immediate help and assistance to rebuild the infrastructure, to help these people rebuild their homes, and most importantly, help these millions of people rebuild their livelihoods, whose livestock, cattle has been lost and swayed away by the flood, who have lost their grain which they store for the whole year to survive. That has been lost. So now the big challenge is how to recreate or re-provide them their livelihood.
Now, there has been criticism of the government for being too slow to act in recent days. This was the Prime Minister's response to that.
We will certainly learn from our experience, but I think the global community should stand by us today. It's a yawning gap between our requirements and what we are receiving till this point in time.
So the Prime Minister says more international aid is a priority. It is already arriving. This was earlier today. Most of it has been approved by global aid groups and from individual countries like the US, the UK and Turkey. But there's another issue here. Getting aid to the people who need it is, for obvious reasons, difficult. Infrastructure has been damaged. In some cases, the water has not gone away. It's not possible to reach them. Here's one assessment from a Pakistani politician.
Aid is not getting where it should go. We've seen in the last 3 months, we've lost about 320,000 bridges. 40 different dams have been damaged, headworks have been damaged. Almost 5,000 kilometers of road has been damaged, which simply means it's impossible to do the communication, the road transport, the railway transport. We do have Navy, Air Force and Army helicopters rescuing the people, but they are simply not enough to do drop shipping or literally dropping the aid to the people. So physical barriers are a huge issue right now.
Well, let's pick up on the issue of infrastructure and look at why these floods have been particularly destructive. Here's one aid worker's view.
At the national level, we could have prevented lots of problems by building resilience. Just 10, 12 years ago, we saw worst floods in the country. And starting from those 10, 12 years ago, if we had started building our resilience against these kind of problems, we could have been in much better position.
And of course, climate change looms over all of this. A warming atmosphere makes extreme rainfall more likely. Pakistan's climate minister spoke to the BBC and she is clear. This is a climate disaster.
This has been a climate-linked disaster for the simple reason we've seen nothing but a cascade of climate events the whole year. Going to 53 degrees south, I mean, that's unlivable. And, then glacial lake outburst floods tripling in their intensity, coming down the mountains in the north, the glacial melt obviously going up because of the heat wave. So we had heat wave after heat wave, scorching and ruining our forest cover. There were fires, and now this. So it's we've all been reeling from climate shock since literally March because we've never had a spring. We just went straight from winter into a scorching summer.
Well, as we've been hearing, there have been extreme weather events through the year in Pakistan. As the country's former environment minister says, Pakistan contributes less than 1% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, but Pakistan is constantly among top 10 climate vulnerable countries. And the head of the UN has this message to the world.
People living in these hotspots are 15 times more likely to die from climate impacts. As we continue to see more and more extreme weather events around the world, it is outrageous that climate action is being put on the back burner as global emissions of greenhouse gases are still rising, putting all of us, everywhere, in growing danger.